Nerds Sports Podcast, where we talk history of the game, numbers, and stats. And each week we highlight a charity that's doing good. If you haven't subscribed yet, then you should, because I'm this the real deal. And you know I gotta shout out the Buffalo Bills. Turn it up to the max, sit back and relax. This the Buffalo Nerds Sports Podcast. Let go.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Buffalo Nerd. For those of you that are going to be watching, you can see there's two of us again, so you don't have to just listen to me again this week. I'm pretty pumped about this one, actually, because when you have a show, I think that's called like the Buffalo Nerd, and you can bring on somebody that writes for the Dynasty Nerds, I think that's like an absolute that you have to do, right? So you guys can see I'm going to be joined by Marvin Elequin tonight. He not only does the stuff with the Dynasty Nerds, he also is a writer with Fantasy Football, got the Fantasy Footballers, and he's also, does some other things as well. I'm not going to spit out everything that he does. I'll let him tell you guys what he's all about himself. But really super excited. We're going to get into some more fantasy stuff this week. I recently have had an experience with fantasy where I realized I'm no good at it. So I really wanted to bring on the guys that are good at it. So we're going to bring on Marvin. He's got a really cool charity that he wants to chat up, and he puts out some really incredible stuff. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun. It's going to be a good show. Marvin, welcome in. Thank you for being here. And why don't you let everybody know a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much, Colt. I'm excited to be here, talk a little bit about the Buffalo Bills and just football in general, fantasy football. Love doing it. So thank you so much for having me. Yeah, you kind of already introduced me, and that was about as perfect as it could be. I'm a writer for Dynasty Nerds, the Fantasy Footballers, do some video content for the Dynasty Nerds as well. So, yeah, definitely specialize in fantasy football and in Dynasty specifically. So for those that play Dynasty football, year-long Dynasty football, that's what I love to do, and that's my passion. So, yeah, I'm definitely enjoy doing that. But just talking about football in general is just as fun, and talking about a good team like the Bills is just as enjoyable, even more enjoyable there.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. It's a good start. Right? That definitely puts you in where everybody's like, okay, I'm listening to this guy.
There you go.
Right?
Yep.
So you actually are a fan of a really good football team too, right? And we're going to get into that a little bit too, because I really want to hear your opinion about it. I mean, everybody's putting out their opinion right now. It's a hot topic, so we'll get into that a little bit. But before we dive too much into that, we'd like to chat up a charity every week, obviously, right? That's what we're all about. And, Marvin got to choose this week like we always do, so it's always the guest choice. So Marvin went with the Open Medicine Foundation this week. You guys can find them at omf.ngo, right? That's omf.ngo. I'm not really going to talk too much about them, so Marvin, why don't you kind of, let us know a little bit about them and, why you chose them.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate this, and really cool that you do this for your podcast. But it's Open Medicine Foundation, and they're the largest nonprofit organization that aims to diagnose, treat, and prevent ME/CFS, also known as chronic fatigue syndrome and other related illnesses. And what that is ME/CFS is a complex multi-system disease with several symptoms, right? And it varies from like cognitive impairment, body aches and worsening headaches, profound fatigue that doesn't get better with rest. And so you're constantly exhausted, and it even makes the simplest things that you do every day very, very difficult. And just imagine being tired randomly throughout the day and sometimes even all day. And really at this point, there is no cure, and any treatments for this, for ME/CFS or chronic fatigue syndrome is rarely covered by standard insurance. So that's why I love Open Medicine Foundations, because they support those that have it and are diagnosed with it, and can really affect anyone at any age, any time. Affects currently 20 million people worldwide, and 70% of them can't work, 25% are homebound. So it can affect a person tremendously, right? And so the reason why I chose this is because I've seen it affect my family specifically, and my wife, her mom, so my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law have both been diagnosed with it, and I've seen it affect their lives, pretty heavily and tremendously. And so that's why I chose this. It's very near and dear to my heart. And it's currently it's actually ME/CFS Awareness Month too in the month of May. So perfect timing. And so I appreciate you having me on. And, obviously there's opportunities to donate, but just even reading up on it and increasing awareness and spreading that is huge. So this, you allowing me to talk about it is truly tremendous. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, this is all I did it. I like to do a little bit of research on everything, before we start talking about it. So I know a little bit about what's going on, because that's part of what this is too, is I don't know about this until I hear about it, and that's how I feel like it is for a lot of people out there, is we don't always get the opportunity to hear about everything. There's so much going on. I mean, we all have Instagram, we have Facebook, Twitter, all that kind of stuff, but there's so much in it that you still can't even catch everything that's going on. So stuff like this, and I went and looked at it, and it's one of those, the foundation is one of those places where not only can you get, connected with resources and all those kind of things, just looking at it, they're working with some incredible hospitals, Stanford, Harvard. I mean, like, they're working with some of the smartest minds out there, to really try to help out with these things. And I know that I've had personal experiences where I definitely take what I can do in a day to day, just like popping up and doing what I do. I've, a son with cerebral palsy. So I've seen that not everybody gets to just do that. Right. So it is and then being just like a fatigue thing where you just physically can't go. I can't imagine having to deal with that when you're so excited to go do something or and then it just hits you and it's over. Right. And, so that's what part of the show was about. We learn about it. You don't necessarily have to donate money, right? We're not all millionaires or have tons of money that we can throw at these things, but you can talk about it. You share it to somebody that all those things can help. And I didn't know that it was their month right now for, what's going on. So very cool. Donate, check it out, share it. Obviously we always put everything in the show notes so you guys can connect over to them and that kind of stuff, but it's omf.ngo. That's not a joke. I know that sounds like it rhymes or like something like that, like it's not a .com or .net or whatever, but it's omf.ngo, the Open Medicine Foundation. So head over there and check them out. Appreciate you bringing up the personal stuff too, Marvin. I mention it probably every week, I think is that we all have something going on,
exactly.
that not everybody's dealing with the same stuff, but we all got something going on. So it's very cool. And to kind of segue off of that a little bit, there's something going on with your favorite organization. And for the people that are going to be watching this, you might have guessed who his favorite organization is by the jersey that's behind him. But for those of you that aren't seeing this, Marvin's a Green Bay Packers fan. So I mentioned earlier, they're a good organization, right? So I also feel like I've chatted with Jimmy Christensen on the show already. He's a Packers guy. And it's nice to talk to, folks that are fans of an organization that's been successful and is in a small market, similar to the Bills, right? So how are you feeling right now with Aaron Rodgers kind of just like dangling the franchise like wherever he wants?
Oh man, it's definitely nerve-wracking to think about what this team could be without a good quarterback, right? It's a team sport, but having a good quarterback obviously helps your team significantly. So, right now it's hard to really keep track because there's news coming from left and right, different rumors here and there, who leaked what and who knows what. So it's hard to really know what's true and what's not. And I know he was on an interview yesterday talking about it and saying that it's about the people of the team that make everything go. And so, yeah, I understand that. And it's definitely true, but I'm still not sure where this is headed. And that's the uncertainty of it. Right. I certainly, if you think about what he's thinking about, like the security, they drafted a quarterback in the first round last year, drafted a running back in the second round when they had Aaron Jones. It's like there's some questionable decisions there, so it's definitely understandable where he's coming from. And there, to put it simple, it's the Packers are kind of in a tough situation here. They can kind of admit to the mistake that they made, extend him, and then you kind of have two quarterbacks under contract for the next 3 to 4 years, which will be interesting. What you do there, because you ideally like a Josh Allen, right? And we're gonna we might talk about him here, but you had him under a rookie contract. You could build around him, and that's the beauty of a rookie contract. Well, they won't have that with Jordan Love if they extend Aaron Rodgers. So it'll be interesting to see what they do here, and if they do end up trading him. But yeah, regardless of what you think of the situation, this team won't be the same without Aaron Rodgers on and off the field. And so selfishly, I'd love for him to stay, but I can definitely see that there's so much going on with that situation that it's hard to even keep track.
Yeah, I kind of feel, I'm sorry that I'm going to say this actually, but I think it's kind of fun to have to ask people how they're going to handle not having a quarterback after being a fan of a team that's what we were searching for so long. Because as much as we like to call it a team sport, 100%, if the guy behind center ain't the guy for your team, it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to find that guy, and you guys have that guy, and he's playing I can play forever. I don't want to play forever, but I'll go play over here if they want me to play over there. And it's just like he's dangling it around, and it feels weird kind of a little bit, because is he trying to say that like the changes from like taking a little bit of the history away from it is changing what the Packers are? I mean, because I still feel like they're a winning team,
mm-hmm.
right? I mean, you were right there. You were close to being in a Super Bowl again with this young guy who's come in there and making these changes. So it feels weird to me that that's kind of like the line that everybody's talking about right now that's being driven in the sand, is it's like this old Green Bay versus new Green Bay. And it's like, well, there has to be a transition in every franchise, mm-hmm. right? I mean, it's got to happen, Aaron. You're going to have to leave at some point. And as much as we love star players, I'm of the mentality that maybe you move sooner than later. Yes, it's going to hurt, right? But wouldn't you rather try to find the next guy sooner than wait longer? I don't know. So it's dangerous. It feels mm-hmm. really weird that this is taking place, right? And especially with the other star quarterbacks having so much trouble this offseason, Deshaun Watson's in heat. Mm-hmm. Russell Wilson wanted to be traded apparently this offseason as well, so it's very interesting. But yeah, you guys are a completely different team if he doesn't play, or if he doesn't play like he wants to be there, right? I mean, at this point, would you almost feel like even if they keep him, he's still kind of going to be like, yeah, well,
yeah, I guess it depends on what they do here next, right? If they extend him and they kind of show him the loyalty that he wants, then I think he'll be out there and he'll want to win, because I think ultimately that's what he wants. He wants to win a Super Bowl, and so that's kind of the motivation for him. But of course, financial security, all that stuff, being the franchise guy, that's all part of it, and he deserves it because he's just that good, right? And so if they don't extend him and they're like, well, you can either play for us or and that's that, and we won't trade you, then of course I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of sat out. I'm not sure if contractually if he can even do that, but it's kind of like a game of chicken, like who's going to blink first here? Like what are we going to do now with Aaron Rodgers? Should we extend him? Should we not? There's just, I mean, they can go in so many different ways, and I think obviously the easiest way is to just extend him and deal with the Jordan Love contract later on, because first of all, you never really know, like as much as we want Aaron Rodgers to be healthy up until he's like 45 playing at a high level, you never know what could happen. And so he's playing well now, keep him now, and you have an unknown at backup quarterback in Jordan Love, but you kind of deal with that as you go and just stick with what you have now, because if, like you said, you were just a few plays away from making it to the Super Bowl. You were right there basically 2 years in a row, so just keep at it. And they added some pieces this offseason. So we try to keep this core and go for it again, because not many teams have the opportunity to do this, 2-3 years in a row.
Right. Absolutely. What if just like crazy oddball thing, but the NFL does a lot of crazy oddball stuff right now. It's amazing how much the league has changed recently. But what if Atlanta calls up and they say, hey, we'll give you Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. You just have to give us Aaron Rodgers and, like a first round pick. What are you going to do?
Oh man. Hey, you're putting me on the spot here. I mean, honestly,
this is real life, not even fantasy, just real life.
Not even fantasy football.
Yeah, just real life.
Giving up that first round pick is I'm not sure I would. I'm not sure.
Matt Ryan and Julio. I mean, Matt Ryan's got 2-3 years. Then you'd have Julio across from Adams.
That's the thing. I would much rather trade for just Julio and then make Aaron Rodgers happy that way.
Right.
But
there it is.
But yeah, no, I do think, if you did bring in Matt Ryan on this team with Julio Jones, I think they'd be just as good. Because I don't think we talk about this, how about quarterbacks being important, but Matt Ryan isn't a terrible quarterback. And,
right.
You have the pieces around him, plus Julio Jones, Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones. I mean,
running back. Yeah.
That is a pretty dangerous team. And so you'd have to really think hard there. Now, I don't know if Atlanta would do that. And if, of course they're trying to trade Julio Jones right now, but it's certainly an intriguing package that I must say is
would
really
probably
tempting.
be cheaper for Atlanta too, right? I mean, because it would only take Aaron's huge contract, and Green Bay would have to take probably Julio's money and Matt Ryan's money as big money too, realistically. I mean, so they're expensive package for sure, but it's just, I mean, I feel like if you're a GM and you're in that kind of turmoil, that you just shoot a shot like that and see what they say. Be like, hey, so you guys seem to have a disgruntled player. We have a disgruntled player. Let's just swap those, and you throw in Matt Ryan too.
Let's figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
So, all right. So now let's get into what you're really good at. Because like I spoke a little bit at the beginning of this, I've recently found out that I'm terrible at fantasy football. And it's mostly because I started playing with people that like actually truly pay attention to it, like, and really study the game and do that. And wasn't fully prepared for all that. So I got into some leagues and I was like, what's going on as the draft picks were taking place? So I sent you over some questions, just like a little bit of a couple things, just doing some like startup stuff, because I want to just kind of get a feel for what a pro actually thinks is the way that you approach like a startup again, right? So we talked about the running backs. I kind of asked you, like, out of the rookie running backs, if I had a chance to just take one of those, who would you say would kind of be the guy? And you were like kind of down to the top two guys realistically, right?
Right. Yeah. So, when we're looking at rookie running backs in this class specifically, I think it's got to be between Najee Harris and Travis Etienne. And the reason I bring it down to those two guys is because first round running backs have the highest hit rate, or when I say hit rate, they average top 12 or top 24 numbers for fantasy. And they have the highest likelihood of doing that if they're drafted in the first round. And understandably, when you see guys drafted like Saquon early on, right, and guys like that in that draft range in that first round, they receive the opportunity because you invest so heavily in them. They're thrown out there, right? And so it's what's interesting about these two guys specifically is that they're kind of in polar opposite situations, or so we think, right? Because Najee Harris with Pittsburgh, there's no one there. There's no one there
right.
that really has proven it, and he's the guy. He's going to have like 250 to 300 touches. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's the best running back in this class. And obviously 1,500 total yards in 2 years each, right? Powerful and elusive 3-down potential. So I'm all in on Najee Harris and what he could be. But and this is something where it's a little, I guess, just not controversial, but just not necessarily the consensus is everyone has Najee as the RB1 in this class. But for me, I think it's actually Travis Etienne, considering what we've seen from him in college and just the body of work and his total production profile and what he brought to that team and his college career. I mean, he was one of the most efficient running backs in college history, averaged 7.75 yards per touch on 700 touches in 4 seasons at Clemson, 6,000 total yards, 78 total touchdowns. And, what he did with his efficiency and that number of touches, not many running backs have done that. He was more efficient than Saquon Barkley, Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey on a per touch basis. And that actually correlates well in the NFL. So when you're efficient in college and hyper efficient, that usually means good things for you in the NFL. And so everyone, talks about how he had that amazing 2,000 scrimmage yard season in 2019, and then he kind of regressed in 2020. But when you look at it really, I mean, his junior year was amazing. 8.3 yards per touch, 2,000 scrimmage yards. I mean, it doesn't get better than that, right? Not many people do that. But then when you set the bar that high, of course he's going to drop off a little bit. And that's what he did in his senior year. But we still can't overlook that his receiving yards market share improved by 4 percentage points. So he was more involved in the passing game. Love to see that from a running back. He averaged 6.9 yards per touch, which is still better than Najee's final 2 years. So he was one of the better running backs, but he set the bar so high that when he regressed in his final year, that everyone just kind of forgets about what he's done the years before. So to me, I know his situation isn't ideal. He has James Robinson there, but I do think his potential and his production profile comps to some of the guys like Dalvin Cook and Christian McCaffrey and how good they were in college for so long. That's why I think Travis Etienne has maybe the highest ceiling and has the most efficient ceiling, in my opinion. And so that's where I like both these running backs, but I've rambled on and on about Travis Etienne, but really I like both these running backs. I just think Travis Etienne just has that higher ceiling because of what he did in college.
So most of that you were all saying was all based off of the numbers and the background and everything like that. Do you consider it all of who they're going to be playing against in this? Like, so, you've got Jacksonville is going to be playing Indy, Tennessee, then you got Pittsburgh is going to be up against Cleveland, Baltimore, Cincinnati. Does any of that play into it? And just for the record, I took over a team and I was able to get Travis as my guy, as my first round pick. I think I had like 1-7.
Oh yeah, he's been dropping.
Yeah, he was my guy at 1-7. I took him. He was sitting there. I was like, I don't think I can pass on him, right? So I'm glad that that's who I ended up with after hearing you say all those numbers and stuff. I'm like, oh, that's cool. But do you put any of that in, or do you strictly just say these numbers are just showing me? I mean, plus he's got 4 years of numbers, right? And he's playing against good competition.
Exactly.
Does any of that weigh into it?
Yeah, that's definitely something you have to think about, kind of the division that they're in and the competition they're going to play against. But, I think about, defenses turn around so quickly in the NFL, like defenses that are good 1 year. I mean, we think about kind of the top defenses just even like 3 years ago, it might not be as good 3 years later because things change, free agents leave, things like that. And so sure, right now it just seems like the tougher division, but yeah, that's where when you weigh in situation, that's where I think Najee has the edge because of kind of where he's playing, the team he's playing for, older quarterback. So there's that. You do have Trevor Lawrence, who is the younger one, but when you're thinking about, even just from a fantasy perspective, I talk about dynasty. Travis Etienne, I think, might have the higher dynasty ceiling, but when we're talking about 2021, it's got to be Najee because of the touches that will be given to him. Doesn't have as much competition, and then just like currently what we know about the teams that they'll be against and the situation he's in, I think Najee's has the more favorable situation in my opinion. So it factors it in, and then that's why those two are kind of neck and neck, and everyone has them. Well, not everyone, but I think they are, for the most part, kind of the 1A and 1B in this class for me. So
yeah, I mean, I think of that. You play some of that stuff into it, but I always find it like the strength of schedule thing, right? When you start putting out the strength of schedule, I'm like, how do you know that's the strength of schedule? I mean, so many people have moved pieces, right? And I mean, I get it. Like a lot of it's going to stay the same, right? Like you can say the Packers are going to be towards the top. You can do some of those things, but when you start talking about this, like you just mentioned, a team could be the Ravens defense this year. They lost both their edge guys to free agency. Like you don't know what they're going to look like. They're typically a good defense and they'll probably not regress terribly, but they might be completely different this year. Right. So you don't know. So very cool. Out of those two guys, that's who we're going with. So the next thing I asked you about was because this was just like for all of my team that I have, I actually have Jordan Love is like one of my guys that I have. And then I was like, I don't know who else to take in this draft. So the guy that you're going to talk about is actually the guy that I took, which is actually pretty funny. But so I asked you, out of like the rookie quarterback, like kind of guys who would you grab, that's like a later round person that's not going to be, the Lawrence or the guys that are going to get grabbed right at the beginning. If you got to get this late round kind of guy that you're throwing a waiver at, really, who's the guy? Yeah.
So it's got to be, outside of the top 5, because they're really top 5 guys in this class, it's got to be Kyle Trask, who was the 6th running back taken, right? And he was drafted at the end of the 2nd round, so he doesn't have that first round draft capital. But I think he, the way Bruce Arians and that team has talked about him and how much they rave about him, I definitely think there's an opportunity there for him, depending on how long Tom Brady plays. And I think that's the thing, is like we don't know how long he's going to play. He could play for a while, but I think they drafted Kyle Trask with the mindset that he could be the successor to Brady in Tampa Bay, and had a solid 2020 season, 43 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 4,000 plus yards. And you think about kind of what he has to look forward to. He could have Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and we remember Gronkowski, right? But there's OJ Howard there too, who was one of the better prospects coming into the league. So he has, like, if he were to be the quarterback even this year, he's got a solid team around him with a good defense there as well. And so it's a great situation. That's why I think he's kind of a sneaky guy you can grab, like you said, in the later rounds, or in depending on the league format, he might be on the waiver wire. So, grab him. And if you have Tom Brady, he's kind of like the backup to him right now. And he has some decent upside if he gets the opportunity. Yeah,
man, I felt like for me, just looking at it without really diving too deep into it, just as like he's going to be on a rookie deal, so they can afford to keep him around for 2-3 years, whatever, just sitting there behind Brady. And if I've got to pick a quarterback that's going to be learning from somebody, as much as I dislike Tom Brady, he's a phenomenal quarterback. And so I feel like if there's any kid, and then they put a second round pick into him, which tells me they believe that he's good enough to be up there, and they had concerns enough that other teams might take him if they didn't go into the second round and take him, right? So I do agree with you that he is. I'm looking at probably the successor, right? I mean, it may be 4 years when his rookie deal's up, you know, but who knows? I mean, Tom Brady is going to be the link, but like you mentioned, he's got a good team around him. He's in a prime situation to just learn and watch a team be successful, right? I mean, I'm not anticipating that Tampa Bay is going to come out and be terrible. Are they going to be as good as they were last year? Maybe not, but they're not going to be terrible by any means. They're going to be a team that's going to be successful. They're going to win. He's going to get to be part of a winning organization. It's going to become the way that he understands the game. We win. We don't lose. We win. That's what we do, right? I mean, so it's funny because my draft was well before this, and it's funny that I asked you all these things afterwards, and you sent these names back, and I was like, all right, that's cool. That's cool. Okay. So I'm feeling a little bit better about it. But is there anybody else that you're even kind of like, yeah, maybe?
You know, you could. The thing is with quarterbacks, it's like once you're drafted outside of the first 2 rounds, it's kind of like the chances of you producing is fairly slim. Now you do have those outliers like a Dak Prescott, right? And you do have, Tom Brady, right? I mean, ultimate outlier right there. But usually you want to look at guys drafted in the first round because they, it's somewhat also the team's kind of placing a value on the quarterbacks highly, whether they should be drafted there or not. They get drafted in the first round. So when you're not drafted there, it's tough. And so Kyle Trask, he's kind of an exception because of the reason why they drafted him, and second round isn't that far off. But another guy I think of is like, we talked about Deshaun Watson potentially. So there's Davis Mills, who is a rookie for the Texans, who they drafted in the third round, early in the third round, if I remember correctly. And so he could be someone who they'd have to rely on this year. Now, we talk about opportunity all the time as being the reason why for fantasy, for example, or even just in general real life football, right? That's what you need to succeed. And so he's someone who could have the opportunity this year, depending on what happens with Deshaun Watson. So, and his draft capital in fantasy leagues is not very high right now. So you can grab him pretty cheap, and he's got potential for the opportunity even as soon as this season.
Yeah, I mean that's the other name I was thinking of too, is because he's in the situation where he's probably going to play. Like he might be the guy, right? And worst case scenario, I mean, he's going to struggle, right? I mean, he's not on a good football team, so he's going to struggle. But I mean, if you got worst case scenario, he's at least going to learn how to play in this league. And if he happened to come out and play good, maybe they're just like, forget Deshaun Watson right now and all the trouble that's coming that way, right? We'll just roll with this kid. So very cool. So up next, we're going to move over to the hot topic. And I think the Bills Mafia is, gets pretty worked up about this one a lot. The running backs in Buffalo. I asked you if there was one of them that you really had to kind of choose that you were going to put, attach yourself to, who would it be?
Yeah, this was a tough question, and probably why you asked it, right? And it's Josh Allen kind of takes up a good chunk of that rushing work. So when you look at Zach Moss and Devin Singletary, I don't feel the greatest about either one of them, but I do think Zach Moss is the guy to grab there. And the reason why I would do that is because just looking at some of his metrics, even last season, he was one of the more efficient running backs with limited opportunity, right? And so he was the RB7 in yards created per touch, and essentially yards that gain beyond what the line has blocked for him. So that's really good to see that he's efficient at creating. And part of that is because he was also the RB7 in evaded tackles per touch. So he finds ways to break into open opportunity, and whether that alone is valuable too, right? Because if you're just relying on the offensive line, that might not get you very far in certain situations. So it's good to see that. Wasn't really a big play guy. Singletary was the receiving guy, had the higher receiving work, but still, Zach Moss was from, when you look at the numbers, the red zone guy had the highest opportunity market share in the red zone at 33.3%, 31 total opportunities inside the 20, 3 more than Singletary on 3 less games. So you can kind of see the role there. And so when I'm thinking about fantasy and I'm thinking about upside, I lean towards Zach Moss because of what his role could be in the high value area of the field, and that's in the red zone. So, it's really tough because they kind of cap each other's upside. And I just think about what this could mean for fantasy if they just committed to one of them, right? But that's kind of like, it's almost like a blessing and a curse that you have 2 decent running backs that you can put out there. And for the team, it's, that's good to have, but for fantasy, it's not ideal. So to me, I think it's Zach Moss, but it's tough. I remember having both of them on the team, on one of my fantasy teams last year, and I couldn't decide who to start at times, and it was really rough. But yeah.
I mean, for me, it's like if you could take them and just combine them, they would be great.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
The only thing that Zach Moss is truly missing is like the catching aspect of it. Mm-hmm. Because I agree. To me, even the numbers are showing that the game plan was for him to be the guy. I mean, mm-hmm. he's built a little bigger. He's built a little bit. He falls forward with most of all of his runs. He's that type of guy where he's picking up, like you mentioned, if the offensive line doesn't go anywhere, at least his ability might get you 1 or 2 yards. Mm-hmm. Where Devin Singletary's is probably going to bring you back some. But Singletary's been putting in work this offseason. But to me, if either one of these guys had to just cement the role, Zach Moss would only have to learn how to catch the ball a little bit better. Mm-hmm. He's better at blocking and he's better at running. Singletary would have to learn how to block better and how to, run better in between the tackles and finish runs, and I think mm-hmm. that's harder to do than Zach just learning how to catch the ball mm-hmm. a little better out of the backfield, because he still wouldn't be asked to do it a lot. But I do agree. And now we've added Matt Breida into the mix too.
Yeah, right.
So that, right. To me, he was kind of what we were missing was some like speed. I felt like last year, that's what we were truly missing was a back that could produce some speed. Right. So it's going to be really interesting now, because now it could be a 3-headed monster, or mm-hmm. maybe they still have Josh Allen run the ball every single time. Right. I mean, like it's a weird concept, and I feel like it's hard for guys. It's interesting that he was still good at being elusive and things like that, because I feel like as a running back, you need to get work, right? You need mm-hmm. to get flowing. You need to get going. Mm-hmm. These guys don't get that.
Right.
They get here, you're going to run this play, and you might run 8 plays later, but we're not sure because that might be a different series. And then the other guy is going to be in. So you might actually run in like 20 plays from now. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it's hard to get going, I would imagine, but I like Zach Moss. When they drafted him, as much as I did like Devin Singletary, I liked that he played in a little cold. I liked that he was built a little more downhill. I like that he was like you mentioned, he can be the red zone guy. He's a little more beef, right? I feel like you got to have that kind of back. If he could get a little more elusive and catch the ball, I think he could be a really good back, but mm-hmm. that's a lot to ask of a guy that hasn't really done it, right? He wasn't really ever asked to do it either. Mm-hmm. But so any other real fantasy spot on the Bills that you're like real keen on?
Yeah. Josh Allen obviously is just going to be good again. Just the rushing flow that he brings. He's going to be a top 12 quarterback, top 5 quarterback, top 3 even. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he finished there. And so, it's he's that guy. And then where it gets a little more interesting is like the receivers. And one guy I'm actually interested in seeing if he can break through is Dawson Knox at the tight end position. I know there's some, obviously Stephon Diggs is outstanding. He's the number 1 option there, but then kind of behind that you have Gabriel Davis, and then Emmanuel Sanders, right, was added to the team. And then I do wonder, like, can Dawson Knox, with his athleticism, which matters at the tight end position, can he kind of break through? And he did kind of, like, towards the end of the year last season, he saw consistent targets. It wasn't necessarily amounting to as much fantasy production, but and yards and all of that, but still opportunity matters. And so I do wonder if tight ends take a while to really develop. We always say that, and now it's his 3rd year, if I remember correctly. So I like his athletic profile a lot. And when you look at some of the top tight ends in the league and look at their athletic scores, like, it's just through the roof. And Dawson Knox kind of checks that box, and he's kind of proven that he can be a solid contributor too. So you just kind of need that next step where he's involved in the red zone and all that stuff too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously in a tough position with having Stephon Diggs on the field with him, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and now you've added Emmanuel Sanders as well. I mean, but to me, that also means that he should be wide open, right?
Right.
Like there should be a huge opportunity for him now to be wide open, like, and to be successful. His only knock really for me has always been that he drops the easy one and he makes the incredible catch, right? I mean, but he could be the guy. And I think the other reason that he's highlighted is because the tight end position in fantasy is so suspect that we're all just like craving for somebody to be good at it.
Yep.
And it would be nice if somebody new did it, right? So it wasn't only like 3 people that you could select from. And then after that, it was like a crapshoot.
Yep.
But I do agree. He's got the build to be able to be the guy that could fit in this offense and be like the final little dagger that they need, you know, where you've got Cole Beasley digging underneath, and then you send Knox over top on like a seam. And then you've got Diggs and Emmanuel doing things on the outside. I mean, he's going to have huge opportunities against safeties deep down the middle of the field if he can be the guy. I mean, Josh Allen's got the arm to do it, and he trusts him still. I mean, he's had a lot of drops and he's in big moments and stuff, but he still goes to him when he's the guy. So the tight end's exciting. I mean, it'll be awesome. I actually drafted in one of them, the kid that went to Pittsburgh, Pat I think is it Freiermuth? Is that how he pronounces
Pat
it?
Freiermuth, yeah.
Freiermuth, yeah. I drafted him in the one dynasty league that I'm in too, because I think he's going to an ideal situation too, realistically. And he didn't play last season, so nobody thinks he's any good. But if you go look at his tape from the year before, the dude makes all the catches.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's very good. And he's going to a tight, what used to be like a tight end heavy offense. Like Ben Roethlisberger used to love his tight end, right? I mean, you used to hear Heath like every friggin' other play, right? That's like all it was. So it'll be interesting to see if he can develop into a good player too. But you're real quick. I want to get your opinion on Pitts in that move of going that high for a tight end and all. I mean, now we're seeing some of it unfolding where Julio Jones might not be there, and now his upside is considerably better, right? Because now he's only sharing targets with Ridley. But what do you think about this whole? He's the next generational tight end, and he's going to be the guy.
Yeah. So as I was kind of going through this class, and what I like to do when I evaluate some of these rookies is I try to look at their production profile. Try to watch a little bit of film, not the best, the film expert. There's so many others better than me at film. But when I try to combine some of that, some of the opinions from others, and then look at their production profile, Pitts is really in line with some of the best we've seen over the last, several years, the last decade or so. And he is the perfect combination of production, which he did at Florida, was very productive as a receiver, not even just as a touchdown guy. He was all around great combination of speed and physicality, and can line up all over the field, and has tested well as an athlete as well in his pro day. And I mentioned already, like, athleticism matters for the tight end position a lot more than the wide receiver position, and running back even. So it really, the fact that he tested so well as an athlete and was in like the 99th percentile on some of those scores, plus he was super productive in college, that really makes him one of the better prospects we've seen. Now, that's saying that he's one of the best prospects. It's hard to really predict, of course, if he's going to be Gronk level at the next level, because so much can affect that. But at face value right now, he sure looks like he could be, and could be in line with like the Rob Gronkowskis, the Jimmy Grahams, those guys, like have that kind of a career. And so, of course, drafting him that high, on the plus side, that's draft capital for him. So that means they're going to use him pretty heavily. But, I do wonder, like, could you have gone offensive line there? Could you have invested in a quarterback, considering where Matt Ryan is? But, and now that I think about it, they're trying to...
Or any kind of defense.
Yeah, because they could
any kind
use
of defensive player.
Right? But... now they're trying to trade away Julio. So I'm like, well, then are you really going for it? Are you like, well, I thought you're going to try to go for it and have like 3 awesome receivers and you'll figure out the running back position or whatever. But it's like, well, I thought that's what they were going to do. And now they're going to trade Julio. So it's like, well, what's going to happen here? But on the plus side, that means Pitts is going to be lining up all over the field without Julio, and he'll still have Ridley to, keep defenses honest and having to guard Ridley as well. But it'll be interesting with that. And I do think he has the opportunity now, and he's got the production profile and the film to back it up.
Yeah, Atlanta to me is one of those teams that they've been so successful as of late that they're being allowed to be terrible right now. They're just making the dumbest decisions on the planet right now. Like, it's like, wait, so you went up and you got them, okay, like why? And then now it's like, okay, so now you're getting them. We're going to get rid of one of the best wide receivers in the league to bring him in. Like, it just all feels weird to me. But I did see a thing today that said his numbers wise, like size and hands and arms and like all that kind of stuff, he's Calvin Johnson. I mean, he's basically Calvin Johnson. Calvin Johnson ran like a quicker 40. Pitts has like bigger hands, but besides that, he's basically like the same build as Calvin Johnson. So he's got that ability, right? But the tight end position in this league is so weird that you might not be able to find the right way to use him, or that he might just look like he's not any good, right? It happens sometimes where you get put in a situation where you're just like, you're all world, and then where they put you just isn't the right place for you. The offensive line's no good. I don't think he's that great of a blocker. I think he's probably got some room to go in that department, but you shouldn't be asking him to block all that much. I mean, if you're going to spend your 6th pick on him, the first round, I'm not sure you want him blocking that often either. But so very cool. So we're getting up kind of closer to the transition point where, I mean, I feel like we've been nerding out the whole time, right? Because that's pretty much what we've been talking about, numbers and all that other kind of stuff. Before we transition, actually, is there anything else dynasty fantasy wise that you want to chat about real quick?
No, I think that was a fun conversation. I think that the conversation about the running backs in Buffalo is always a hot topic in fantasy because there's value there, but you just never really know. But yeah, no, it's been good. I've loved talking about mix of football, real football, and some fantasy in there too.
Yeah, the only thing that I think is going to potentially save either one of the backs in Buffalo this year is if they change the scheme a little bit, but they should have some continuity at the line, right, this year because they're bringing most of the guys back. It might be a different left guard or whatever, but they're actually going to be coming back with some continuity this year that typically helps too, I think. But we'll see. I just want to see and you know what? Speaking of that real quick before we transition, I don't care that neither of them are all world in fantasy or putting up really big numbers because we still won a lot of football games.
Oh, yeah.
So as long as we're winning a lot of football games, I don't care if they touch the ball one time a game. As long as it works, keep doing it. Right?
Just run it through Josh Allen. He'll win you games. There you go.
That's right. When he's feeling it, just get out of his way.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So, all right, so let's move it over to the nerding out session. I like doing this part, just kind of pick your brain a little bit off. It's not really off topic, but, just kind of, not necessarily chatting about fantasy or sports or whatever, but yours is going to segue back into that stuff a little bit just because that's what you're all about. But so the first question up is, your favorite sports book or things like that, something you enjoy reading or just something that really made you love the game, whatever.
Yeah, no. And so this one's actually, so I might mention an article here, and it's a recent article that was written by the Fantasy Footballers content manager, Kyle Borgognoni, who hopefully I said his last name correctly there. But the article is Fantasy Football and the Evolution of Language. And it's not necessarily centered around numbers or statistics or anything like that. But what it focuses on and what I appreciate about it is how fantasy football is essentially a language, right? And it's something that we kind of have our terms that we talk about in fantasy football that we throw around, and with any language, it should evolve. And so it's an article that's changed the way I write, the way I think about when I try to put some of my thoughts into words into an article. And I think about fantasy football, and if you're on Twitter, for example, it's kind of like a community there, right? It has its own culture in a sense, and culture is linked to language. And so when we interact with others in our leagues and terms we use to describe these real life NFL players that we're obsessing about in a fake football game, right? Fantasy football.
Right.
We should, and this is quoting Kyle here, and he said we should use words to build bridges, give grace, and promote diversity. And it's just a great way of looking at fantasy football, just as almost like a way to bond together, because it is a culture, but that we use words that are respectful in that sense too. So it's not necessarily about strategy or anything like that, but that's why I loved it so much, is because it's a different aspect of the world of fantasy football. And also won FSWA Article of the Year. So it's one that I've enjoyed reading and definitely still think about when I'm trying to write an article. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's very cool, and it makes a ton of sense, right? I mean, like, especially if you think about the fantasy football community when it like first started or whatever, it was all just like a picture and then your team's got a name, right? So you don't even know like the person behind it necessarily, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter who they are, man, woman, whatever they are, what color they are, none of that stuff matters, right? We were all huddled around a game trying to learn something new and fun to chat about. So I'm definitely read it. It's going to be in the show notes for everybody to check out and everything like that. So everybody else can enjoy it too, because it sounds like it's a really cool piece, and especially like this day and age, I think it really speaks to a lot more than just fantasy football, right? If we just kind of viewed a lot of what the world brings at us and just took it in a little bit friendlier of a fashion, or viewed it as step back and think about it, because that's what you do with your fantasy team every time you do something, right? Is something comes your way, you make a decision, you stop back and think about it, so we should do that with a lot of our decisions. And I think we probably find ourselves in a good, happy place, right? But very cool. In the first article that's been mentioned, so you win that award, Marvin. You're the first article,
man.
So,
love it.
Excellent. So next, I think you probably touched on this a little bit earlier on as we were chatting and stuff, but then what really brought you to the game, Marvin? Or what do you love about the game? Or just like what gets you sitting up, at 9:00 at night chatting to me, doing a podcast? What do you love about the game?
It's first and foremost, I love just watching the game. I think if I could spend like my whole Sunday just watching football, that's I just love watching it, and not even just related to fantasy, because fantasy kind of like adds that level of stress to it. That is just not, you're looking like, is that guy going to score a touchdown or anything like that? Sometimes it's just good to watch and enjoy the game. But for me, as much as I love watching the game, I love the numbers and statistics behind it. And part of that is because I kind of have, as part of my day job, I'm in finance. So I look at numbers every day, and that kind of like is what translates to me intuitively. And so a lot of concepts that I deal with at work actually apply to fantasy football too. So it's just interesting how that can be closely linked. And I know this isn't for everyone, but I do like sometimes just even looking at it, just a spreadsheet of stats, and kind of like trying to figure out like, what is this telling me right now? Like objectively, what is it telling me? And not trying to, cherry pick stats or anything like that, but just holistically, what trends can we see here from a list of running backs and their production or whatever it might be. So, it is the nerding out segment. So that's part of, that's one of the things that I really enjoy about the game.
The guy that writes for Dynasty Nerds better bring the nerdiest stuff. That's all I'm saying. So absolutely happy that that's the way you end. And I mean, I'm the same way, but I've recently transitioned, in the past few years. Like, for one, when I asked you earlier about like who you would get on the Bills, I don't draft any of them because I don't want to be pissed off about my fantasy team and pissed off if they lose. Right. So I don't want both. The only thing I might take is the kicker, just cause, right? But like, I'm not investing in the Bills in fantasy hardly ever, because it'll ruin my day, right? And I'm not trying to have that happen. But I love the number stuff too. I don't know that I've really started staring at the spreadsheets and stuff yet, but the numbers tell you everything you need to know. I mean, it's interesting. I think like the fantasy football guys even talk about it a little bit too, that they actually use things like the Vegas odds and things like that. I mean, there's people out there doing a lot of work. There's numbers that you can go and find and follow, and things like that the data shows you a lot of different things. Even the article that you just wrote that's up on your Twitter account right now as your most recent article. I mean, it's all about just like the numbers for rookies and all that kind of stuff, right? But it's over, what was it, an 11-year period?
From like 2000 to 2018.
Right. So even further.
Yeah.
Right? You went back that far, and the data shows that the success is only in the beginning, right? Yep. So the numbers, if you really look at it, will tell you the story that you need to know, right? I mean, there's a reason that the baseball number changes when the wind's out, right? I mean, when the wind's blowing this way to that way, there's a reason things happen, right? So numbers are the key to all this success. But all right, so up next, besides my podcast, you're allowed to say mine if you want. Just kidding. What is your favorite podcast to listen to when you're just hanging out or whatever? Like, what's your jam?
Yeah, so I might be a little biased here because I do write for them, but it is the Fantasy Footballers, and it goes way back even before I wrote for them, and it's just that I didn't initially grow up watching a lot of football. It started with when I met my wife, and that was years ago. Like when I got introduced to her family, they're diehard Packer fans. So when you're going for like, hanging out for the holidays, you're watching a Packer game most likely. So that's how I got into it. And then with that, in college, joined the fantasy football league and started to like that even more. But I wanted to kind of get a little better. Like, how do I get an edge here to win some of these fantasy football games instead of losing all the time, right? So then I found the Fantasy Footballers, one of the first podcasts I found entertaining and informative, and it's just a fun one to listen to. It's funny and one that I can just turn on when I'm doing dishes or just even during like in between like doing things at work. Like I can just turn it on and listen to it, and it's just entertaining. But then I get my information in fantasy football with it too. So one of the first podcasts I listened to and still listen to it now whenever I can. So it's definitely up there as one of my favorites.
Yeah, that should tell anybody that pays attention to fantasy football that the people that are actually good at fantasy football are listening to fantasy football, because there's other people that are good at fantasy football and you can actually pick up like different little ways to view things, right? And it can actually help you out a ton. I was talking to somebody recently about how I went like years where no matter what in redraft, I did this thing where 9th and 10th rounds, I took back-to-back quarterbacks for the longest time, right? And I tried to take 2 really good quarterbacks, but then it just put me in the predicament every week where I was choosing the wrong one, right? So it was terrible. So it's fun to learn different strategies and find out other ways that are doing things. I just learned a bunch in this best ball thing that I'm in, where I basically think I'm going to be the worst team possible. Like I might get the lowest score ever, right? Just because I was like, I don't know what's taking place right now, but very cool. So kind of in closing here, the last one, I always like this one because some people like to say a player, some people like think of a flag, some people think of, a play and specifically, but what is when Marvin's sitting there and he just thinks back to like this play that just eats you up inside, or this flag that was thrown or whatever, just something that it still sticks with you. You're just like, you know what? I just can't let that go.
Yeah. And it still sticks with me because it's so recent, but it's as a Packer fan, I had to pick that play to kick a field goal with, just a little over 2 minutes left in the game against the Bucs in the NFC Championship. They kicked the field goal. And it was one of those situations where I was like, well, why did we do that at first? And you look back at it and I think there was some logic behind it, but obviously the odds were like you give it to your best player, right? And that's Aaron Rodgers. Give him a chance to throw the touchdown and get that 2-point conversion, and you're tied, right? But then I think about it, it's like, well, then you're tied at best, and then you still have to keep Tom Brady from scoring, which in that game he was just on fire, right? And our second cornerback, Kevin King, was getting burned left and right. So it's one of those things where I kind of understand where they came from. Kicking the field goal, they almost stopped Brady 3 and out, and then they could have had the ball back to win the game and win it potentially 32-31. Chances are very low for that to happen. So, it's one of those where it's like you can run all these situations in your head, like what would have happened. The fact is they kicked the field goal. They didn't get the ball back because of a flag that was, in my opinion, justified, because, Kevin King was literally, just holding onto a player's jersey there. You can't really deny that. And so flag was called, end of the game. And it's just a heartbreaking way to lose when you got that close, and they were down quite a bit in that game, if I remember correctly, and kind of climbed their way back. And it just, it's rough when it's just like one play. It's almost, I sometimes wonder if it's easier to just beat down for most of the game, because then we're going to lose. But when you're so close, you have a chance, and it just doesn't work out. It's rough.
Yeah, you'd almost want to just get blown out sometimes instead of losing by 1 point at the end of the game, right? Because it just takes you all the way to the end of it. But the field goal thing it's the same with the Bills, right? The Bills tried kicking the field goals against Kansas City when everybody was clamoring to just go for the yard, right? Just go for one more. This is Kansas City. You got to score touchdowns, right?
Right.
And they didn't do it. Then they missed field goals, and things happen. So I 100% can feel your pain in that department for sure. So we're coming up, getting close on our hour here, Marvin. Before we close out, anything you want to shout out? Anything you got coming up? We talked about your article a little bit, but we'll have that in the notes and a link to that and everything for everybody. But anything else you're working on you want to shout out?
Yeah, no, I appreciate this so much. I really had fun just talking football with you here. And one of the things I'm working on right now is just an article series kind of highlighting efficiency at different positions. So it's, running back efficiency and wide receiver efficiency. those articles are already out on the Fantasy Footballers, and kind of looking at, relative to a player's workload, were they efficient with it or were they not? And so I kind of run through different numbers there, a whole bunch of players. And so I have tight ends coming up next, quarterbacks coming up too. So I'm sure Josh Allen will test well in all of that. And it's a series that I'm working on here for the next couple of weeks. So that's coming up. And as always, anything I do can be found on Twitter. And so just follow me there, and you'll most likely find most of my work.
Yeah, absolutely. And just so you guys know, Marvin's really good at keeping the Bills fans happy. That's twice now that he said the right things. So, but besides that, I didn't even get into it when we were talking about it earlier, but I started reading that article just so the Bills fans out there are aware. And as I got down through it, I stopped at running back immediately, because it turns out that third round running backs don't actually score a lot of fantasy points, which kind of drew my attention and might draw your attention as Bills fans for, I don't know, a couple of reasons, both of them in the third round. But we'll find out this season. I'm expecting some good things. But thanks again for coming on, Marvin. Absolutely. Thank you for everybody listening, watching, however you're listening to us, seeing us, all that kind of good stuff. We wouldn't have a show without you guys. We wouldn't have anything to talk about. So thank you very much. Make sure you go and check out the Open Medicine Foundation. All that stuff will be in the show notes. You can check them out at omf.ngo. And obviously everything I'm working on, you guys can find over at the Buffalo Nerd. And Marvin, all his contact stuff will be down in the show notes. I think he's mostly a Twitter guy, and that's at @FF_. It's Marvin, MARVIN and E. And that would be where you'll find him, but that'll be in the notes. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Just listen to the Buffalo Nerd Sports Podcast. Make sure you leave a review and subscribe so you never miss another episode. We'll see you next time. Leg out!